What if I told you that North Korean fighter pilots once went head-to-head with Israel's Air Force? Yes, North Koreans, thousands of miles from home, in the deserts of Egypt. This is the strange Cold War story of how Egypt invited North Korea to fight Israel, and how Israel showed why it ruled the skies. Sky dominance that continues till this day in 2025. Let's get into it. In 1967, Israel stunned the world in the Six-Day War. In less than a week, Israel crushed Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. The results? Israel seized the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank from Jordan, and East Jerusalem. The Arab states were humiliated. You see? For Egypt's president Gamal Abdel Nasser, and later Anwar Sadat, losing Sinai was not just military defeat. It was a wound to national pride. Egypt vowed, one day we'll strike back. But there was a problem. Israel's Air Force was unmatched. Israeli pilots flew American-made F-4 Phantoms and French Mirage jets. They trained relentlessly. They developed tactics, precision, and confidence. In contrast, Egypt's Soviet-supplied MiGs struggled. The Egyptian Air Force was plagued with poor training and rigid command structures. Every time Egyptian pilots tried to contest Israeli jets, they were shot down, sometimes by the dozen. So Egypt needed help, desperately. Egypt was a Soviet ally. The Soviets provided weapons, training, and advisors. But Sadat wanted even more manpower, more experienced pilots. Kim Il-sung, North Korea's leader, was eager to answer. He wanted to project power far beyond the Korean peninsula. He wanted to show that North Korea was part of the global struggle against the US and its allies. Israel, in North Korea's eyes, wasn't just a country. It was an imperialist puppet of America. And so, North Korean pilots were quietly shipped to Egypt. During the War of Attrition from 1969 to 1970, Egyptian and Israeli forces clashed constantly along the Suez Canal. Artillery duels, commando raids, and most importantly, fights in the air. Egyptian MiGs needed skilled pilots to match Israel's Phantoms. So North Korean pilots stepped in. They flew Egyptian MiG-21s, hoping to even the odds. But here's the truth. They never stood a chance. Israeli pilots were veterans. They had fought war after war, trained non-stop, and mastered aerial combat tactics. The Israeli Air Force was known as one of the best in the world. North Koreans. Brave, yes. Ideologically committed, maybe. But skill-wise, they were outclassed. Reports suggest that at least 20 North Korean pilots were shot down in dogfights over the Sinai. Some historians say Israeli pilots described them as aggressive, but predictable, falling into traps, unable to adapt mid-battle. Israeli soldiers and pilots were always in shock to realize the man in the cockpit they just downed wasn't Egyptian, but Korean. Fast forward 3 years. Enter Yom Kippur War of 1973. On Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in Judaism, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack. Egyptian troops stormed across the Suez Canal. Syrian tanks thundered into the Golan Heights. For a moment, Israel was caught off guard. And once again, North Koreans were there. They flew combat missions, helped man air defenses, and guarded Cairo against Israeli air raids. But the outcome was familiar. Israeli pilots adapted quickly. They regained air superiority within days, even when surrounded. Israeli aircraft racked up staggering kill ratios, sometimes 10-to-1. North Korean pilots contributed, but they couldn't and never would have been able to change the outcome. Israel's Air Force proved too skilled, too advanced, too relentless for them. After the war, Egypt shifted away from the Soviets. All in all, despite Soviet weapons, despite North Korean manpower, Egypt still couldn't break Israel's dominance in the skies nor the ground. And Sadat realized something crucial. Moscow wasn't giving him what he really needed. Soviet aid came with restrictions, slow deliveries, and political strings. Meanwhile, Israel kept growing stronger thanks to American backing. So after the Yom Kippur War, Sadat made a bold decision. He began pivoting away from the Soviets. He expelled thousands of Soviet advisors. And by the late 1970s, he shocked the world by visiting Jerusalem and signing a peace treaty with Israel, the Camp David Accords. Egypt became the first Arab country to officially recognize Israel. And predictably, that ended the odd alliance with North Korea overnight. Kim Il-sung was furious to him. Egypt had betrayed the revolutionary struggle. But for Sadat, it was survival. Aligning with the US was the only way to rebuild Egypt and avoid more humiliating defeats. So stop and think. For a brief, bizarre moment in history, North Korean pilots really did fight Israelis over Egyptian skies. They shed blood far from home, but in the end, Israel's superiority was undeniable. Egypt learned the hard way that Soviet and North Korean help couldn't close the gap. That realization pushed Cairo to abandon Moscow, to embrace Washington, and eventually to make peace with Israel. And North Korea. Well, their role faded into obscurity and irrelevance. Many Egyptians themselves didn't even realize foreign pilots had fought alongside them. Yet in Pyongyang, the story lives on. North Korea boasted, and still boasting, that its heroic airmen had shed blood on Arab soil for the liberation of Palestine. They built monuments. They wove it into their myth of eternal resistance. The strange alliance dissolved. You see, history is full of strange alliances. But few are stranger than this: North Koreans fighting in Egypt's deserts against Israel's supersonic jets. It's a story that reminds us wars aren't just fought on the battlefield. They're fought in alliances, in strategy, and in the skies where skill can outweigh sheer numbers. So ask yourself this: if Egypt had never realized Israel's superiority, would the Middle East map look different today? Thanks so much for watching all the way through. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think or what topics you'd like to see next. Also remember, sip and subscribe. The button is down there, and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on new content. Stay awesome, stay hydrated, and I'll catch you in the next one.